Hey everyone, this is Miguel, the Movie Encyclopedia, signing in for a new review. For this episode, I'll be discussing the long delayed but highly anticipated Marvel film Black Widow, starring Scarlett Johansson, Florence Pugh, David Harbour, and Rachel Weisz. After a year of COVID related delays, the exciting Black Widow solo film that fans have been asking for since Black Widow's debut in 2010 has finally arrived. I was really excited when this movie was confirmed after Avengers Infinity War, and then I got disappointed after it got delayed several times instead of releasing the film on Disney Plus back in 2020, and concerned when the reviews came out, and although being relatively positive, were significantly lower compared to recent Marvel movies and TV shows on Disney Plus. However, all my fears were completely put to rest after walking out of the theater at the end of this movie. Black Widow provides everything that fans have been asking for in a solo Black Widow film, while also giving the first female Avenger the proper send off she deserved after the events of Avengers Endgame. Black Widow is honestly one of the most surprising movies I have seen in 2021, despite some holes in the second act. The story follows Natasha Romanoff in between the events of Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War. While on the run from American government, she is contacted by her long-lost adopted sister, Yelena, played by Florence Pugh, a fellow Black Widow who informs her that the illegal Red Room operation that's created all the Black Widows is still active, and that is up to them to take it down once and for all. Along the way, they team up with their adopted parents from the Red Room days, Milena, aka Iron Maiden, played by Rachel Weisz, and Alexei, aka Red Guardian, played by David Harbour. The story does a shockingly good job of mixing a dark action spy movie with a heartwarming superhero family comedy, similar to Guardians of the Galaxy or Shazam. It also deals with deep themes about the dangers of unchecked government organizations and the exploitation of children by human traffickers, while giving a compelling character study of Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow. The biggest flaws I saw with this film were really found in the final third act. As the movie wraps up, there were a few unanswered questions about why Black Widow kept out of contact with her adopted Red Room family during the events of Infinity War and Endgame, and why she never mentioned this family to any of her Avengers friends. Black Widow never explains this, and that really bugs me. Also, the movie doesn't go into detail on Milena and Alexei's motives for being a part of the Red Room, other than a brief explanation that lasts less than a minute. It was pretty sloppy, but I can't blame them given how much story they had to fit into this 135-minute movie. The acting and characters of this film are probably the biggest highlight of Black Widow. Scarlett Johansson once again delivers in her final performance as Black Widow. However, the highlight of this film was Romanoff's extended Red Room family. Florence Pugh is hilarious and charming as Black Widow's surrogate sister Yelena, a badass MCU spy with the potential to be a great Black Widow in the near future. Rachel Weisz is also very charming and equally fascinating as Romanoff's surrogate mother, Milena, a Red Room scientist and former Black Widow, who is instrumental in their brainwashing operations, who sadly gets a very rushed redemption arc given the severity of her crimes. However, the biggest standout member of the Red Room family was easily David Harbour as Alexei, aka the Red Guardian. The character is Romanoff's surrogate father, who is essentially if Captain America was an overweight Russian drunk, well past his prime, but constantly wants to relive the glory days that never happened. By far the funniest character in the movie, and the funniest new MCU character since Korg from Thor Ragnarok. Together, this bizarre Russian spy family does something that I was not expecting: cope with the truly horrible mistakes they have all made in their pasts, and drive home the theme that the best way to move on from their collective pasts is to confront them head on. It's a bit cliche, but it works really well within the confines of the writing of this movie. The villains of this film are kind of a mixed bag. Taskmaster in Black Widow is significantly different than the comic book version. Whatever ideas you have about Taskmaster's identity based on the comics going into this film, drop them completely because none of them are true. Taskmaster's identity and backstory is a strong twist on the character, but the character, aside from that, has no personality whatsoever and serves as nothing but a badass goon for the real villain, the new character known as Drakov, played by Ray Winstone, who is, by the way, a major surprise. Although his motives are incredibly cliche for a Marvel villain, his methods to achieve these goals are what really makes him stand out. In that regard, he is truly one of the most sadistic, heartless, and evil villains the MCU has ever produced because he really propagates the dark themes that this film tackles. The support of human trafficking and brainwashing of children by shadow organizations that exist outside the law thanks to government support. In conclusion, Black Widow surprised me. I came in with low expectation and was thoroughly impressed with this film's great cast, dark tone, and thematic superhero spy story. Don't get me wrong, this is not the best superhero movie of the year, especially with the incredibly experimental superhero movies coming from both Marvel and DC Comics later this year. But this movie is a welcome return to the cinematic side of the MCU that also gives the studio one of its most unique solo character films in years. I'm going to give Black Widow a 7.7 out of 10 stars. This was a really good movie. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you all for watching. If you like this, make sure to subscribe to my channel, comment on what you thought of this video, and make sure to share with friends. Make sure to follow Miguel the Movie Encyclopedia on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to get updates on new episodes and geek culture news. Speaking of which, if you want to hear me talk about geek culture, including movies, TV shows, and video games, check out the Movie Encyclopedia podcast. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you find your podcast episodes. I post episodes monthly talking about the biggest geek culture announcements and reviews of the previous month. Until my next episode, see you then.